family at Iridium. Hope everyone's doing all right today. I've got Mark with me. Mark Cloer, how you doing, mate?
Good, man. How are you?
Yeah, good. We're a little bit laggy here, a little bit behind, so hopefully everyone can forgive us for that. But we're going to talk about underrated and overlooked artists. So I said in this series that I'm going to mix it up a bit. Some will be Zoom calls, some will be on my own. So I've got Mark with me. We've got to the letter O. So Mark's got a couple of bands to talk about. I've got one thing to talk about. So Mark's going to kick it off with his first O of underrated, overlooked bands or artists. Go on then, mate, when you're ready.
Okay, this is a local band from here in Columbia, South Carolina that I doubt anybody watching this has heard or heard of, but they're called Osara.
Break me to make me whole again. Stop me to watch me roll again.
I first discovered them in June of 2019, the last time I saw Stryper. Stryper played in the upstate about 2 hours away, and Osara opened the show. And the ironic thing is, they're from here where I'm at in Columbia, but I had to go 2 hours away to learn about them. We were standing waiting to get into the show, and there were a couple of girls in front of us, and we were chit-chatting back and forth, and one of them said that they weren't even there to see Stryper, they were there to see Osara. And I had never heard of them, and I said, you know, who the hell's Osara? And they said, well, they're from Columbia. And, you know, ironically, we had just drove 2 hours from Columbia to get to the upstate, never heard of them, and didn't know what to expect. You know, a lot of times when you have an opening act of a local band, a lot of times, you know, they're not real impressive in a lot of cases. But as soon as these guys hit the stage, we knew they were the real deal. They're young guys, early 20s, but they just put on a show like unbelievable for a unknown local band. They've had 2 albums. One was just a 5-song EP, came out in 2015. And then their most recent full album came out in 2019. It's called Apocalypse. The singer and guitarist is a young guy named Colton Beasley. He sounds a lot like Miles Kennedy to me, which gives them an Alter Bridge kind of vibe. Their slogan is they call their music classic rock, modern roll, which is a good description because they've got that vibe of 80s type metal with a modern twist on it as well. The guitar player is a young guy named Lael Silva, and I'm telling you, this guy is so good. He could step on stage with Ozzy. Randy Rhoads is his hero. We actually talked to him one night after a local show, and they've done a cover of Bark at the Moon. Unfortunately, they didn't put it on this album, but there is a YouTube video. They did an amazing cover of Bark at the Moon. But anyway, they're just a very impressive band for a bunch of kids, basically. Yeah. You know, I say kids, they're in their early 20s. I'm old enough to be their father, so I call them kids.
Well, mate, I mean, listen, I mean, there is obviously so many bands out there that are not going to be heard by anyone, and that's what this show's all about. It's about, you know, giving people the chance to check this band, and most of the time it doesn't cost anyone to click on YouTube and have a little listen, does it? So I'm sure the albums are on YouTube. Right. You can have them on Spotify if you've got Spotify. Yeah, and have a little listen. And I mean, I have had a quick listen. I remember ages ago you sent me it and I was really impressed, but with the plethora of stuff I have to remember, and I'm getting old, so I forget stuff as well. I never went back, so I'm definitely gonna add them to my Spotify list immediately after this, because anything that's, you know, sounds a bit like Miles Kennedy, he's got a brilliant voice, and that, you know, like you're saying about the guitarist, well, that's for me,
Yeah.
that sounds right up my street. So I'm going to check them out. Everyone else, check
You're-
out Osara.
You being the production guy, that's another thing. The production on these two albums is incredible.
Mm.
I've heard a lot of local albums that have come out that the production sounds like they were recorded in a garage. The production on these albums is so impressive. It sounds like it's more impressive than a lot of these big name bands that are putting out, you know, major label albums. The production on them just makes them sound huge.
It is so important.
Hard to believe they're a local band.
That's great, man. So excellent shout out to that band. Hopefully they get to watch something like this and let you giving them a shout out. That's great. I've cheated a little bit on my own, mate. I've got to admit, I've cheated a little bit. So I was finding it hard to find a band with the letter O. So I sort of didn't do it, a little bit of a dodgy one, I suppose. And I'm looking at the Oliver Brothers. I think that's how you pronounce it, the Oliver Brothers. That's how it's spelled anyway. From Savatage. So,
yeah.
I mean, and really, I'm sort of not cheating because they're my favourite part of that band, or was the favourite part of my band. So Savatage, I'm sure a lot of people know they are 80s band. They do take long breaks between albums, but for good reason sometimes. So I'll give you a little bit of history on the band. Got John Oliver on the vocals, and Chris Oliver is the O I'm talking about on the guitars. So they was founded in 1979. They was actually called Avatar to begin with, the band. And another band had the same name, so they changed it to Savatage. And I suppose if you want to, I know a lot of people will know this band, and I think they've built up more of a status over the years now, and people look back and look at them as a really good band rather than at the time, if that makes sense. It was like people liked them, but I think they've grown over time and people look back at being a huge band now. I suppose if you want to describe their music, it's power metal, I suppose, a little bit progressive, and even a little bit of thrash, slight elements of thrash, not too much. So they, like I said, they was going from 1979 to 2002, so a long stint there. And then they didn't bring anything out for years. 2014, they brought another album out, and now we haven't heard from anything since 2015. So I think they've been split up since then. But I've heard they've got a new album. They're working on a new album, which is quite exciting. So John Oliver the singer, has been involved in loads of projects, but I just want to talk about Savatage because that's my favourite part of his vocals when he's with those. I mean, he's done things with Trans-Siberian Orchestra, John Oliver's Pain, which is another sort of, it's called that. It's not a solo project, but it might as well be. Their albums, they had a couple of not so good ones till they hit their stride, just like a lot of bands did in the 80s. So they had Sirens out, which is a debut, Power of the Night in 85, Fight for the Rock has taken a bit of stick, their 86 album. It went a bit more commercial for that sort of time, 86. But I quite like it, actually. I think it was a good album. But I think, for me, and I think this goes with you, mate, my favourite albums are the two albums that came out in 87 and 89, and that was Hall of the Mountain King in 87 and Gutter Ballet in 89. I had both of those albums, and they are the only albums I actually owned way back then when I was a kid. They also brought out Streets, a rock opera in 91, which was also a good effort, but it is those two albums, Hall of the Mountain King and Gutter Ballet, that got me. I really love them. Then John Oliver actually left the band and was replaced by Zach Stevens. Now, I like Zach Stevens, but John Oliver, man, he's got a one-of-a-kind voice. He's got this shriek. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, this shriek that he does. No other singer sounds like him. And they brought out Edge of Thorns with Zach Stevens, but sadly, and this is where really like went tits up. Chris Oliver died 6 months after the release of that Edge of Thorns album in a car accident. Drunk driver went over the other side of the road, head-on collision with him and I think it's his girlfriend at the time. She survived. I'm not sure what condition she's in, and he died instantly, which, well, how sad can you get there? And then they brought out, obviously, new guitarist. Poets and Madmen came out with Zach Stevens. But then John Oliver made a comeback on the last album. Poets and Madmen was the last album with John. John Oliver came back for that album. That was the last album they did. So that was in 2014, 2015. And I think John Oliver's back for the next album. So it's not Zach Stevens, it's John Oliver again, the one they're talking about working on. So, man, I mean, they do sound different than anyone else. That's the thing. And they're very sort of theatrical as well at times, I would say. I'm more into their straightforward metal side, to tell you the truth. That's what I like. I mean, just thinking about some of the songs that even the openers to 24 Hours Ago, that song, and, you know, Rate of Rage and War, which opened, I think, Gutter Ballet. Some great songs, man. And the guitaring from Chris Oliver, it was just different. I think they're both so different, which makes them stand out, Sabotage. So that's my O, mate. That is my Oliver Brothers. So I did cheat a little bit, but because I've got so many S's. When I get to S, mate, I'm going to have to do about 4 programs. So I've got enough S's. So I'm going to go for the O, Oliver Brothers. So there you go, mate. You like a bit of Sabotage, then?
Yeah, they had a very, even though they were an American band, they had a very European sound to them.
Yeah.
They influenced a lot of that European power
Definitely.
metal. I especially love the Gutter Ballet album. Title track, When the Crowds Are Gone.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing song.
Yeah.
Hounds, Summer's Rain. Just some great stuff on that album.
You know what, mate? That's my favorite. That's my favorite album as well. I liked Hall of the Mountain King, but Gutter Ballet was the one for me as well.
Yeah, I agree. I actually saw them in a small club in '93, just a few months before Chris was killed. It was on that Edge of Thorns tour with Zach Stevens, and ironically, again, Zach Stevens is from here. In Columbia. So that was kind of a big deal at the time, kind of a homecoming for him. And here he was with this national, well-known band, even though they were playing in a pretty small club.
Yeah.
But I saw him in the summer of '93, and then, like you say, Chris was killed in October. So I probably saw him at one of his last gigs. Terrible loss to the music world.
Yeah, I mean, their fans as well, mate, are very dedicated. I mean, I belong to some of the social media groups, and they are fully fledged Sabotage fans, and they're one of them bands, I think, like I said, have built up their reputation over time. And when you look back, I think it was something really special. I think everyone thought a little bit different at the time. Perhaps didn't know how to take the band because they were a bit different. But now I think they were a bit ahead of their time, to tell you the truth. That's what I think. Yeah, that's probably one.
When you first mentioned doing this, I honestly got to admit I hadn't listened to much Sabotage in years, but I went back and pulled out my old cassette of Gutter Ballet, and as I played that, I remembered how much I liked it back in the day, and I don't know why it hadn't stayed with me over the years, but there was some great stuff on that album for sure.
It's a bit of an evil sounding voice he's got, isn't it? It's a bit threatening, that voice he's got, for sure. It's brilliant. Okay then, mate, that's my that's my O. You're going to talk about the last O we've got. You've got another one.
Yeah. This is a band called Obsession. were from Connecticut, were founded in Connecticut. They formed in 1982 and broke up in 1989. The singer was Mike Becerra, who later went on to join Loudness for 2 albums. I mentioned this before, but we used to have our local university had a college, or they still have a college radio station, but back in the day, they had a metal show every week. I think it was on Tuesday night from like 9 to midnight. And I religiously listened to that in my teen years and discovered a lot of music on that show. And Obsession was one of the bands I discovered on that show. But they put out a EP in 1984 called Martial Law. They put out their first full-length album called Scarred for Life in 1986. And then in 87, Methods of Madness, which is my favorite. There are 2 standout tracks on this one. There's a ballad called Desperate to Survive that was actually used in some cheesy slasher movie back in the day. But my favorite is a song called For the Love of Money. And to this day, that is one of the best metal songs I've ever heard in my life.
Oh man! I mean,
anybody like 80s metal, and they have a bit of a Sabotage vibe to them. That's kind of what I would classify them as, is that type of power metal. But if you like Sabotage, you never heard Obsession, at least listen to that one song, For the Love of Money. Amazing band.
Cool.
They broke up when Mike joined Loudness, and then the band reunited in 2004. It was basically Mike with a new group of musicians. Put out an album called Carnival of Lies, and then another one called Order of Chaos in 2012. I gotta admit, I don't own those, but I'm gonna go back and add those to my collection after I've rediscovered Obsession doing this. I need to go back and order those.
I mean, you
another unknown band that could have been bigger than it was.
I mean, Mark, you sent me a couple of links to a couple of YouTube videos, and I listened. I only listened to a few seconds of one the other day because I was doing this, and I was really impressed. It sounded, if you like your classic 80s sort of sounding, that the one I clicked on, very 80s sounding, classic sort of, great singer, great guitaring, you just wonder, some of these bands, there was just so many bands, man, that not everyone could make it, could they? That's the thing, and they go under the radar. It was just, it's like now there's tons of bands, man, but people don't get to hear them. They just don't. It's just so much music now. There's even more now, in my opinion, than there ever was.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the bands, you look at Frontiers, they're releasing fucking shitloads of, you've got AFM Records, there's Heaven something Records. There's so many labels now. It's not just Frontiers that are producing these really good bands. And yet again, people ain't getting to hear them just like they didn't in the 80s. It's the same thing. But it's not going to get so big now that it's going to just all of a sudden go. That's the thing. I think it's here to stay now in our lifetime anyway, hopefully. So there you go. All right then, mate. Well, listen, that was great. What a brilliant! I love it because we're changing. I like changing these things around, and I got to do O with you, and it's not the usual, just me talking. So I really enjoyed this one, and everyone, obviously, Sabotage are probably the most well-known band out of all 3 of these, and you may have heard those, but I'm sure if you're like me, I haven't heard either of Mark's ones, and I'm sure they're gonna be great because Mark's got really good taste, just like me. So there you go. All right then, mate, thanks for joining me. Anything you want to say before we go?
No, just appreciate you having me on, and giving me a chance to give a little love to my local boys here. Like I said, they're young guys, but they belong on a much bigger stage. They really do. If anybody gets a chance, just Google or go to YouTube and especially the Apocalypse album. If you're a metalhead, you'll enjoy this album. Trust me.
And listen, that's what I said. It ain't like the old days, man. You don't have to go out and risk it. You can have a little listen now. If you like it, then you can get it, can't you? That's the difference. That's the difference now, man. So
right.
Thanks for joining me, man. Everyone, please comment below. What do you think of Sabotage, for starters, if you know them? What's your view of them? They are definitely underrated, sometimes overlooked. And have a little listen to Mark's couple of bands, and let us know in the comments below what you think. So see you next time. Cheers, mate.